I don't ride enough. And now that I've kind of removed one bike out of the arsenal, the Ascot, I have a little bit more time to ride this. This is my first time filling up the Klr650. $2.99. That is the cheapest. Let's fill this thing up. Who thought it was a good idea putting a stupid TV screen with ads on a gas station? Alright, top of the gas. You know, one of the things I like about the KLR is that it's very close here. Everything is like within reach. The Super Tenere, you have to stretch to get to these buttons. On this, it's just like so close. Like it feels like it's a very short bike. You know, there are some things that Kawasaki could have done to improve it. Like, you know, they don't have to change the bike, but if they want to keep it a one cylinder, which is a good touch because there is a demand for the thumpers, less complexity, but just changing out the electronics of the Klr650 much earlier would have been nice. You know, they have the ability with like computer, you know, conductors and processors. They could have put like a really nice digital dash like already in the 2008s, but they didn't. Like, I wonder why they just don't use the dashes from like the higher end bikes. It's just kind of like make them work for this, because when Honda now is doing stuff with their inline 2s that they have, like the CB500, the NC700, and all of those two-cylinder bikes that Honda's making, Honda puts that digital dash from one bike to the other, and that's how they keep the budget down, because those bikes are very brilliant. They're extremely good, but they keep those bikes nice and simple. They change things just on the frame. They use the same engine. Like Kawasaki could have done that with this. I don't think I'd enjoy this bike too much on the highway, but I have ridden my Klr650, my old one, on the highway. And so one of the things you learn from the Klr650, this generation and the previous ones, is that it burns a little bit of oil at highway speed. Another thing that this bike doesn't have is like oomph. You know, like when you like squeeze the throttle on a 1000, you just get like a kick in the pants. This one doesn't have that, and I think that's the reason I first sold my Klr650. It didn't give me that high from having a bike that was powerful and you could just like twist the wrist and it was just like carry you forward and push your brain backwards into your skull. When it comes to handling, this bike handles pretty well in very low speed sort of roads, and it loves these roads. You know, these roads are not perfect at all. These little back roads through farms, they're very bumpy, but the bike kind of soaks it up very well. And you're kind of perched up high on top of the bike, so you have a very good view. Look at these guys, right over the double yellow. You can almost tell how people behave like ahead of time. That's why like the grass clippings are really not an issue when it comes to hazards for motorcycles. You really need to concentrate more on the cars. The thing about this bike, it's just so easy to kind of like turn your head and kind of do very commute-like things. Like even if you're a courier, you could have a book bag and kind of maneuver it really easy. The bike itself it doesn't feel like heavy for a road bike, but it feels heavy for a dirt bike. There's a thing that riding off-road is a lot harder than riding on the road fast. Being an off-road rider, you almost have to be like grow into. There's a car behind me. I gotta make sure that he stops. You gotta make sure that you start really young. It is very much like learning anything, like gymnastics, martial arts. It has to be done when you're young. Sure, you can like get on a bike and get very good depending how committed you are, but I find that a lot of people, especially around maybe major cities, they're not that passionate, and they're not passionate about anything. only tippy toe this bike. The Super Tenere, I can actually like touch the ground, but this one is a little bit taller. So one of the cliche things that riders often say, or I should say moto journalists, is that certain bikes are for beginners and for advanced riders. You know, you hear that a lot. You often don't hear that of cars, right? Like a car like a 911 isn't like for a beginner or advanced rider. It's just like a car. But for a motorcycle, there are bikes that are universally accepted as being for advanced riders. Usually the 1000cc sport bikes, the large and the ADV bikes. But the Klr650 does feel like it's one of those bikes that you can get it as a beginner and you can get it as an advanced rider, because it doesn't really require much. You know, the bike itself is very easy to ride. I mean, it really has very little issues riding, and advanced riders would get this because they want something simple. And normally it's like after they're riding like 100 bikes and they're getting bikes with like adjustable windscreens and all of these things, they're like, oh, you know, maybe going back to basics is good. Yeah, this little thing is quite interesting to ride. It's very easy. Look at this road. I love roads like this. They have a creek on one side and like a twisty like road on the other side. That's the best type. Look at this. This is Mount Airy. Mount Airy is one of these places in Maryland that's really pretty. That's not mountainous, but the outskirts show the mountains, and I kind of like that. Klr650 in the gravel. This bike was meant for this, for munching lots of these little gravel roads. I mean, this is not really a very difficult area to ride on the KLR, but man, this is the type of road that I like riding. And in Arkansas and Oklahoma, I rode through some areas that were so gravelly. You know, the gravel here in Maryland and Virginia is pretty thin. It's crushed gravel. It doesn't require a lot to ride, and any car or whatever will go through here. But these bikes are just fun to ride on this because there's usually not any cops. And get this, this bike doesn't have ABS. It doesn't have traction control like the Super Tenere. I mean, I don't understand why Yamaha didn't just make a button to switch off that ABS. It's just crazy. But I love these kind of like little roads. Like, it always feels like I'm exploring something, and cops are not going to be around here. Yeah, this bike loves these kind of uneven roads. It's very natural to ride like this. And the suspension is kind of stiff. It's stiffer than the old Klr650. Whenever you hit, oh, what is this? Whenever you hit like the front brake on the old Klr650, that front end just dove in like crazy. And I don't know, it kind of like felt like a cushy luxury car because the suspension just like tended to bottom out everywhere. But this one is much stiffer. Like, it's much better for, oh, look at that, Trump signs. See, that's the thing. Around here, you'll see a lot of Trump signs. Oh, look at that, a crane.
What?